ON AM and FM.
Good afternoon. My name is Paul Vanas, and welcome to Real Estate Pro Talk. This show is a real estate-oriented program which will cover a variety of topics every Friday afternoon from 3 to 4 p.m. here on WOON Radio. Some of the topics we'll be talking about during our time together will be how to buy and sell a home, how to choose a real estate agent, how to choose a mortgage broker, flipping real estate, home inspections, and a whole lot more. I've been in the real estate business coming up on 40 years now, of which I own a real estate brokerage company, a real estate school, and a land development company. All of the knowledge that we're going to try to impart on you today is based on the continuing education classes that we teach licensed real estate brokers and agents, along with my personal experience and those of our expert guests. The goal in doing this is so you'll have the information in hand when you meet a seasoned real estate professional. You're welcome to call us today. It's 401-766-1240. 401-766-1240, and ask any question on the subjects we'll be discussing, or you can call me on my personal cell phone after the show at 401-265-6144. We're glad you joined us today. We had a couple of weeks where we played some repeats, but we're back in business here. Our guest consultant today joining us is Jeanne Elson Gordon. Jeanne is with Keller Williams Realty Leading Edge in Lincoln. Good afternoon, Jeanne. How are you?
Good afternoon, Paul. How are you? I'm fine.
I'm doing well. Thanks for coming on. We're in this unique situation here where we're calling into WOON remotely. We're all kind of hunkering down, self-quarantining, and but that doesn't stop business, does it?
No, it does not stop business. There's ways we can go about doing it.
I know you were out earlier this afternoon or this morning conducting business, albeit at a distance, but how are you finding things?
I'm finding things not as fluid as before, but getting it done. It's more picking up paperwork from somebody that's in quarantine and not touching it for 3 hours because she's in quarantine and so am I. So, but it's getting done. It's a little more difficult. I'm using the computer a lot more. I'm using emails and scanning things and trying to do things remotely. So.
Yeah, and of course it's a little tough to shift over. I know you and I, with the real estate school last week, we had to shift over from doing live in-person classes to webinar-style classes, which was an exercise in and of itself because neither one of us were used to doing that, but we got through it. But, I'm still getting calls, Jeanne, on my properties. I got a couple this morning. I got a couple yesterday. I have some people that are out looking regularly. I think a good part of the public realize that, at some point this is going to be over. And they everyone still needs a place to live. There are folks that, they have to buy a house. There's relocating professionals coming in. There's people who have sold their house that are going to need a house to replace it with pretty soon, albeit the closings are kind of delayed, and we'll talk about that in a little while. But I don't think our market ever sleeps because we have a necessity. The housing is a necessity. How are you seeing things in that respect?
I'm seeing it the way you are. People are relocating and they do need to sell their house or buy one here. There are people divorcing and they need to relocate themselves. And quite honestly, it's a very good market for sellers right now because there are not many houses on the market. So if they're on the market and priced right, they should be getting good activity because there are buyers and there's going to be bidding wars,
It's funny you mentioned that statistic because, as you know, I'm into the numbers, the real estate numbers, and I do the numbers every morning. And right now, interestingly enough, the pending sales in relation to the active listings, and for those of our audience who don't know what a pending sale is, it's someone who has signed a contract on a house and put down their deposit and is in the buying process and waiting to close. And an active listing is a house, obviously, that's actively on the market. It hasn't been, it's open for folks to, show. The active to pending ratio right now is 1-to-1, and it hasn't been 1-to-1 a few years. Matter of fact, the last time it was 1-to-1 was 2004. which I thought was really unique because that was a crazy market. And I agree with you, Jeannie. I agree that we have someone, or at least a market right now, whereby there's not a lot of inventory, and because of it, the buyers are going to really, show up in droves, if assuming they're out there.
Yeah. And one of the statistics I looked for when I was teaching this past weekend was the withdrawals, because people can withdraw their property if there's an issue, and a lot of them are feeling that this virus is an issue. And in 2019, between January 1st and March 17th, there were less than 100 houses withdrawn. In the same period this year, January 1st to March 17th, over 500 were withdrawn. So that tells me that 500 people decided they didn't want people in their homes at this period, but they will come back on the market as soon as it's over, because they did with an exclusive right to relist with their agents.
Wow.
So there will be houses coming on the market. So right now, if you are a seller, this is the time to do it.
Oh, wow, that's great information. And I understand we have a caller on the line. Hello, caller.
Good afternoon, Paul.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, a question, Paul, is about disclosure. Could you please tell me the difference between the action of making a new secret information known by the seller and the difference between a judge ordering the disclosure of the government documents?
Okay, so I'm assuming you're talking about a seller's disclosure, the disclosure that's required for every seller by Rhode Island law?
That's exactly correct.
Okay. Jeannie, why don't you take that one, because that's part of your class that you teach.
It is. In Rhode Island, it is required by law that each seller that occupies the home needs to do a disclosure of their representation of what the home is. It doesn't need to go back to the beginning of the home. It's the beginning of when they moved into the home. And they are supposed to be fair and honest in their description of what the home is and what they've done to it. So if they put the roof on, they should be able to say how old the roof is. If they did some plumbing, they should be able to say what plumbing they did. If the house leaks, if the basement leaks during rain, they should acknowledge that. So it isn't critiquing the house, it's a representation of what the home is at that point. Does that make sense? Did I say enough?
No, that's very precise. That's what I was looking for. But I'm sure there's a couple of other things that may be involved. Supposedly that the owner does not, the seller does not disclose these particular informations, and there is something that's found out about the home itself that was not disclosed. Is that an illegal approach by the seller?
Well, that's the seller's disclosure is the form that can get the seller in trouble. All the other forms we use get the realtors in trouble. But if the seller deliberately withheld something, then the buyer would have to go after the seller with a lawsuit. So,
yeah, I just wanted to add something to that as well. I traditionally ask my sellers to put everything they know about the house on the seller's disclosure, because trying to fool someone in this day and age is almost impossible, because the process is when you buy a property, you typically have a certain amount of time to have the property inspected. And if you hire an inspector worth any salt, they're going to go in there and they're going to find the problem that the seller is trying to hide. So, for example, if there's water in the basement that's a constant condition and they don't put down water, no matter how good they try to hide that problem, a good inspector is going to identify that particular property had a water problem. Another thing the sellers have to do, and a lot of folks don't know this, is that once the seller fills out that seller's disclosure and the house sells, someone attempts to buy it, and the buyer has an inspection, and if the buyer finds something wrong in the house and backs out of the sale, if that inspector was a certified inspector, or if they were if it was an electrical problem and it was an electrician who inspected it, or if it was a plumbing problem and a plumber inspected it, that seller is supposed to amend the seller's disclosure and write the new problem down on the disclosure, so the next person, the next buyer, can be aware of that. And a lot of sellers don't do that. They don't amend their seller's disclosure, and the next person's inspector finds the same problem that the first inspector found, and it ends up being this cycle over and over again. Does that help you out?
Yes, it does, quite frankly. So if the seller continues to do this, as far as the inspector is concerned, he keeps finding the same faults, so to speak, with the particular home, is there a penalty that's involved, or is there something that's very illegal where the seller would be liable according to the law?
Well, yeah, there's a few things. According to the law, there's a thing called active concealment and passive concealment. If someone attempts to hide, or if someone in the real estate business, for example, tends to hide a problem, I'll just make up a story here. Let's say every time it rains, someone gets a corner of their basement wet, and the seller has instructed the agent to put, a table in that corner in the basement the day after every rainstorm. That's called active concealment. Active concealment means someone is trying to actively hide the problem to deceive the buyer. Now, passive concealment is something different. Let's say, for example, I have a buyer and I'm in a house, and the buyers, they're talking amongst each other, and they say, "Oh, this is a great house, and it's in the, it's in the so-and-so school district." And I know for a fact that it's not in that school district, and I keep quiet about it, and I let them proceed forward with the sale. Well, that's called passive concealment. But both passive concealment and active concealment can be brought in front of a judge. There's been lots of case law on this. Judge Silverstein has ruled on several cases in the past on this, where either agents or sellers have tried to, hide things, and then later on someone finds out about it. And that's one of the reasons why I tell my sellers up front, hey, put everything down. Put everything you know about the house down. Be upfront with it. They may want to negotiate the price with you because of it, but you know what? I'd rather have everyone, even the buyer, I'd rather have them be upfront and know what they're getting into than having a problem later. And I want to add one more thing. Houses that sell that are new construction are not subject to the seller's disclosure law. Probate houses that are in estates, are not subject to the seller's disclosure law. And finally, judicial sales, where the judge issues a sale, those are also not subject to the Rhode Island disclosure law. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. And one more question, Paul, and I thank you for your time, is about the concealment. Does this happen very often, about the sellers concealing certain areas of the home or the premises where they do not reveal any of the big problems? And if does that spill over into the realtor who is showing the home? Does that affect her in any way in a grievance manner? A grievance manner, or a particular situation where she's not exactly showing the entire house and its problems at the same time?
Yeah, there's several remedies, but you know what? I'm going to have Jeanne tell you her lawyer story. Who bought? She had a lawyer buy a house, and I'll let her tell you that story.
Thank you.
Yeah, I had attorneys, friends of mine, who bought a house, and they were told on the disclosure that the house never had water in the basement. And the first rainstorm after they moved in, there was water in the basement, and they had to have the fire department come and pump it out. And the next door neighbor said, that happens every storm. So being attorneys, they sued, and they won, because that had been purposely withheld from them. And, that is not the right thing to do on a disclosure form. And evidently the realtor also knew. And she also agreed that they'd never had water in the basement. So both of them were sued.
I beg your pardon, Paul, and thank you very much for your input. It's something that is new, and I am not familiar with all of this. I've been listening to your program for the last couple of weeks. We are in the middle of such a deal, so to speak, a transaction. So, again, I thank you very much for your information, and I'll keep listening and going online and find out more things about selling and buying. I thank you very much, sir.
But before you go, are you buying or selling, or both?
Negative. I'm doing neither. I am currently a manager of the premises, and it's a difficult situation as far as buying and selling because the owners are from another part of the city. It's not the house itself. They do not reside in it. So it's just like I'm kind of caught in the middle, and I'm not really quite sure of all the familiar phrases. As a matter of fact, I'm not a student of anything about real estate buying or selling. But so I'm just learning and trying to get along and listening to your program at the same time. And again, I thank you for your time.
You're welcome. But as a property manager, keep in mind that you're not responsible for anything that the seller has either put on a seller's disclosure or neglected to put on a seller's disclosure.
I'm quite aware of that.
Good. I want you to understand that because you have no legal liability there, and I know you probably want to do the right thing as well. Mm-hmm. I don't even, I've always instructed my agents to not even help the seller fill out the form. We had a situation years ago where this agent was trying to do the right thing. The real estate agent was trying to do the right thing. She had an elderly client who was selling her house. And she literally, it's a long form. If for those of you who have never seen the seller's disclosure form, for anything from 1 to 4 units in Rhode Island is considered residential, and that falls under the seller's disclosure law. Well, what this agent did was she took the form and started to fill it out for the seller. She'd ask her, how old is the roof? How old is this? What have you done this? Made this repair? Have you made that repair? And she filled the whole thing out for the seller and then put it in front of the seller and had the seller sign it. Well, don't you know, there was a problem after the fact. And the attorney who was hired by the buyer said, you know what, the handwriting on the seller's disclosure doesn't match the handwriting of the seller.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That's fraud.
Yeah. And he said, he said, well, and it was no fault of her own. She was trying to be helpful because this woman, I guess, had arthritis or whatever. But come to find out, the house had a myriad of problems that weren't disclosed. And the attorney later on, said, hey, look, I'm looking at documents here, and this handwriting on the seller's disclosure doesn't match the handwriting of the seller. Who filled out this document? And because my agent filled out the document, we were dragged into a lawsuit, which, of course, the insurance ended up paying. The errors and omissions insurance ended up paying. But these are the types of things that happen every single day in our business. You try to do the right thing, but you don't even know you're breaking the law.
Oh, my goodness. Well, thank you so much again for your time. And I'll keep listening. And this is going to be happening shortly, I think. But, of course, we have the prevalent virus going on right now, so I think everything will kind of be put on hold, so to speak.
Sure.
But I thank you for your time, and I thank Jenny as well for your input and your explanation of certain things that I was not familiar with. You have a nice day, sir.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, Jeannie, we always get those questions, about the seller's disclosures because, it's not, most all sellers are honest, obviously, but there's always a few that, and, sometimes it's by an accident, as you know. Sometimes people forget how old the roof was or if there was 1 or 2 layers of roof or when they put the boiler in. If you have someone who owns a house for 40 years, I mean, I don't remember when I put my roof on my house, and I've only owned this house for 20 years, so I can tell you it was around 2005, but was it 2003? Was it 2009? I don't remember, but of course, anyone with any questions, feel free to call in today at 401-766-1240, because we want to know what you're doing too. Jeanne and I also want to know what you're doing during this lockdown, self-quarantining. What are you doing to stay safe? How are you making out? Are you climbing the walls yet, like we are? But Jeanne, what are your clients doing right now as from a safety prevention for the pandemic?
Well, they're obviously wiping down doorknobs and cabinets and handles and all of that. But when I do show the house, we try to have very few people. I mean, we try to adhere to the governor's rule of less than 5 people. And for my safety, I like to keep it there too. And we walk through the house pretty much not touching things. I do ask them, please don't open, let me open the doors. Please don't run your hands on the counters, because we're trying not to leave any virus for the sellers, because they don't want that little addition left in their house. And for the most part, buyers are very cooperative with that. I do have a vacant house, and with the vacant house, I unlock it and let them go in on their own, and I stay in the driveway, because that allows them the freedom to walk around and all of that. But I do ask them also, please don't open anything excessively. I've left the cellar door open and, all of that. Buyers also are very cautious at this point. They're coming with their gloves on, and they're coming with, some come with a mask. It's okay to do appointments, but we do need to be careful, because if we don't ask the personal history of people, and it's very easy to be exposed to somebody and not realize it. So, one of my sellers told me this morning that she was exposed at work. So now she's not feeling well. So she's getting a test today, and we're going to withhold showing her house for a couple of days until she knows, because it'll be handled differently.
Yeah, that's all you can really do. I was on a showing last week. I have some new construction going up in Cumberland, and I received a call from a cooperating broker last Sunday to go show the house. So actually, I went by on Saturday and Sunday. I'll give you my Saturday experience. It was an experience where I figured out really quickly that you cannot maintain a 6-foot distance from someone when there's a room full of people, because what happened was I went to show this house, and it was only supposed to be a couple and their agent. And when I got there, the agent was sitting in her car, and the couple pulled up in their car, and then all of a sudden the 2 teenage daughters pulled up in their car, and I think the brother-in-law and sister-in-law or whoever pulled up in their car. And now I'm leading this guided tour through this 2,000 square foot house, and it's almost impossible to maintain a 6-foot distance. And some people were coughing and other people weren't, and I'm becoming paranoid. So I finally just stood on the lawn and said, hey, look, go through, like you just said, knock yourselves out, stay as long as you want. As a matter of fact, lock the door up when you leave, because I'm going to go home right now and take a bath in Purell.
Yeah. Yes, there are some agents, some buyers are letting their agent go through the house and do either a Facebook Live or a Zoom appointment, where the realtor carefully walks around, opens all the what a buyer would be interested in. The buyer can actually ask to see more into that corner, or can you show me deep into that closet? And that way the buyer doesn't have to go on the appointment. So it limits the exposure. And a lot of sellers, listing agents now, are doing things like Matterport, which is that program that photographers use, where you can click on a property online and you can see everything, and you can choose whatever corner you want to get into, and you can look at the appliances carefully. You can really zoom in on the house, and that will eliminate some appointments. So, yeah. So there are ways to even not be at the appointment.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I know there's a couple of companies now using like the 3D type of virtual tour kind of things. I know some companies are taking just what you said. They're going there in advance and filming the house extensively and putting it on YouTube. And then if someone calls and says, hey, look, I want to show the house, they'll email them the YouTube link and say, hey, look at this first before you take the time to go out there and look at the property. So, and of course, it's much different today from when we started, you and I, Jeanne, where you took a Polaroid of the house, and that was the only picture that was in the multiple listing book. And now, my God, you can go on any of these websites and there's beautiful pictures. You can add 40, 50 pictures if you want and really give the buyer some semblance of what's going on the property. So basically then what you're telling me is your business really your brokerage business hasn't slowed down all that much.
It doesn't have to, no. It's a personal choice at this point, So there are lots of agents that are still working. There are some that have decided not to because they're in the high risk category and they've just decided to sit it out. So I think it depends where you are in life, So, but I think, I would have to say people are talking about selling their house, but they're not so much listing them right now. I think agents are lining business up for down the road.
Yeah, I agree. And I think because of that, when this finally breaks, it's going to be like when a fever breaks, the day after your fever breaks, you want to run out and go do everything you wanted to do. I think it's going to be the same way in our business. I think once it breaks, there's going to be a pent up demand. And everyone's going to want to get on with life, as right back on track. So, hey, this has been great. Let's take our first commercial break, and we will be right back.
Real Estate Pro Talk is a live radio talk show dedicated to educating its listeners on the entire spectrum of real estate matters. Part of the American dream is owning a home or investment property, or perhaps even becoming a real estate agent yourself. Paul Vanas and his team of real estate professionals have over 250 combined years of experience in the industry. In other words, we can make it happen for you. Why go down the road less traveled when we can put you directly on the real estate superhighway? Whether buying or selling in today's complicated real estate market, or if you just need advice about jumping into the real estate business for a career change, you'll need a decisive edge based on experience. Call Paul Vanas at 401-265-6144 for a free, no-obligation consultation. That's Paul Vanas at 401-265-6144.
And we are back. Jeanne, every time I hear that commercial, there's good news and there's bad news. We have accessibility to 250 years of real estate experience, but you and I have 75 years of that 250.
We do.
That's kind of a scary thought, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Wow.
It is.
So, again, anyone looking to call 766-1240, call us and let us know if you have any questions, if what you're doing. Even it doesn't even have to be real estate related. Tell us what you're doing about, keeping up with the rules and regulations and the self-quarantining. I went to Super Stop and Shop the other day, and I had my gloves and my mask on, and I bought about $400 worth of groceries, and there was I went at the elderly hours. I call the elderly hours because I qualify. I'm over 60 years old, so Super Stop and Shop had it available from. They were open from 6 in the morning till 7:30, and of course I was there at 5 after 6. And, of course, there was no toilet paper, and there was no spinach, and there were no eggs. So I don't know how I'm going to live without toilet paper, spinach, or eggs. Jeanne, have you found the same thing?
I'm finding that, yeah, but I usually have a well-stocked house. So what is missing in the market, I pretty much have. But, yeah, I had enough toilet paper, thank God, because I haven't found it yet. But the market I go to, I find that the produce is good. Unfortunately, the eggs on sale were gone. It was the expensive eggs, the local farm, and I needed eggs, so I bought them.
Right.
But sometimes you can't be as picky as you'd like to be. But I think there's enough to go around if we don't hoard. But I think with them telling us that the next 2 weeks are going to be the worst weeks, people are buying for 2 weeks so they don't have to go out again. And I think we're going to have shortages again.
Yeah, I agree. And, I read somewhere, and I don't know if this is true. Of course, this has nothing to do with real estate, folks, but it's just my own personal own personal opinion. I read somewhere the other night that this whole toilet paper thing started on Facebook. There was never really a shortage of paper supplies. It started on Facebook in Great Britain, and it worked its way over here via Facebook. So everyone kind of ran out and hoarded it. And that was the problem. It wasn't that there was a shortage of toilet paper. It's just that everybody ran out and bought it all off the shelves, which gave the appearance that we weren't going to get it anymore. Right. And I don't know if you've heard the same story. So, and I guess, social media going amok, some of these things, years ago, it took a little time for us to hear a story. And then, of course, it took a little time to react. Now it's almost instant, and we literally hear things, and then we want to react right away instead of kind of sitting back and say, all right, let's think about this a little bit. But anyway, back to real estate. I hear, Jeannie, that the mortgage guys, the mortgage brokers, guys and gals, are going crazy right now with refis. Because the rate is, I don't know, it's like 3.5% or something, and it's 2.75, I think, for a 15-year mortgage for refi. Have you heard anything similar?
I have heard that the mortgage brokers are very busy, but I've also heard that some of the investors are not buying the mortgages now. And I heard of one situation where they actually had a clear to close for 2 days from then, and at the very last minute it was pulled. And they're looking for a new mortgage person. So those mortgage people that have the great products are extremely busy. And I know you know them, and I know them. So if anybody needs a name or something, I think they should probably reach out and call either you or me, because there are still great programs out there, but you need to know that you're working with somebody that can pull it through in the end.
Yeah, I mean, I was speaking to one of our colleagues the other day, and I think he said he took 18 mortgage applications last week over the phone, all electronically, and I guess you scan papers, you do it, take a picture of a pay stub or something on your phone and send it in, and that will suffice. But I'm glad to see some people are busy and not just sitting around waiting for the storm, for the clouds to clear. Now, speaking of that, Jeannie, have you attended, or do you know anyone who's attended a closing now with this going on? Do you know the format at all, or do you know what's going on?
I know a couple of attorneys have changed their format, and they allow the sellers in first, and then they clear the office, and then they allow the buyers in. They do not allow realtors in at all because they're limiting the number of people in the room. So I think I've heard 3 attorneys doing that. It's like first the sellers, they sign all their documents and leave, then the buyers come in and they sign all their documents and they leave, and then the attorneys forward to the realtors the forms that we need, and they record when the town halls allow them to record, because most town halls are now closed. I think the last list I looked at, there were only 3 towns in all of 39 of us that were actually still open. The others are closed and operating very different hours for recording of deeds. So, yeah, that's all new. It used to be we'd have the closing, the attorneys would get up and go and record it, and we could say, congratulations, you've bought a home. But that isn't the case right now. Sometimes you've missed the time when the town hall is open and they have to wait till the next day.
Yeah, and of course from us, it takes the personal touch out of it, because they're basically telling us to stay home, and rightfully so, because the less people in the room, obviously, the better. But you know what amazes me about the American spirit? I mean, I go all the way back to, I'm an amateur historian. You go back to, not only the Great War, but World War II, how Americans can adapt so quickly to things, regardless of what we do. I mean, this situation, I was thinking of the when the bird flu came out in I think it was the early 2000s. I read the Rhode Island Pandemic Handbook. There's probably 3 people in the whole state that read the Rhode Island Pandemic Handbook, and both of them are probably the other 2 are probably the authors of the book. But anyway, it was talking about some serious, electricity going out because there was no one at National Grid to run the generators because they'd be sick, water going out because there was no one at the water department to run the pumps because they'd be homesick. We're so fortunate that we're sitting here today, you and I, and we're doing this over the internet. And then, of course, Dave at the radio station is magically putting this through the transmitter, and we're still on the radio. And it just amazes me how we can adapt, and the American spirit can adapt in just about anything if you give it enough time and enough creativity to get the job done.
I think this is going to be a situation where our lives change. I think we're going to realize that we don't need all that we thought we did, and that we can operate with less, or we can operate with more, but more of different things. So, and I think the fact that we're left out of closings right now, while I resent it because that's my last chance to see the buyers and let them know how happy I am, or the sellers, I think it'll make me better able to reach out to them when this is over and connect with them again and tell them that I am happy for them and see the end result. Very often we don't get to see how they change a house. So this might be good. We'll be able to see how they change it and continue the relationship.
Yeah, and of course, and too, the pain of change. You and I talked about our school. You teach the agent classes for continuing education, as do I. And this is the license renewal period right now. So when this came down a couple of weeks ago, everyone said, "Oh my God, what are we going to do?" The license renewal date is April 31st, and there's still a few thousand agents that needed to take classes. And what are they going to do? And we adapted. We it isn't perfect right now. It'll get perfect later. When we kind of adjust it and tweak the machine. But I think it's, again, going back to that American spirit, I'm so impressed with that because, I listen to the business stories every night of people that are just doing different things. And, of course, you get into the whole people that are doing charity work right now, and the kids that are delivering food to the elderly, and, the paper boy, if there is a paper boy anymore, who decides to, give his paper route money to some cause. So it's just a real cool thing, I think. But getting back to business now, I sold a house the other day, and again, I never met the buyers. A co-broke showed the house, and all of a sudden my email was going ding dong, and I look at my email, and there it is. There's an offer form. We signed a sales agreement, and these folks are looking forward to buying a house in the middle of this whole situation. And I know you just did one as well, right?
I've got one in process now, yes. It's been a long process, but they didn't change their mind, and we did the inspections last week, and it looks like it's going to go forward. So, yeah, people are still moving, and they are still selling. So, because we all know this will not last forever. It will go away. It's going to hurt because we're going to know some people that we wish we didn't, that the situation wasn't what it is. Yeah. But for the most part, life will go on, and we will move forward. And real estate being as important as it is to the economy of the country, we will move forward, because the fact that we're independent contractors says that we chose the harder route. We don't get paid every week. We don't get paid unless we work.
Right.
So we will work harder to make everything happen. So
now the classes that you've been teaching, you've been going full bore teaching classes to agents. Are you getting any kind of feedback from them? Are they out there as well, or are they kind of shifting their business practices?
They are out there. The other day we talked about how the virus is affecting their business, and a lot of them had shared ideas with me about things they're doing, which I learned from them and they learned from me. And I do learn from classes all the time, but they're the ones that said they were pretty much using Matterport and letting clients look online and insisting that they look online before they actually come into the house because they want to weed out the curiosity. We're not inviting neighbors to look at the house first anymore. We're sticking seriously to buyers. So,
which is really something we should all do during normal times, if you think about it, right?
Exactly. And with the governor asking us not to do open houses, we may actually get away from doing open houses, which, as far as realtors go, we really don't like them. So it might do away with open houses, the way traditions have been done away with before.
Yeah, and that whole open house thing, that's an old tradition that's carried on for years, that started many, many years ago. I never liked them. I know you weren't too crazy about them because I never liked them for a couple of reasons, and you might not think, my reasons might be different from your reasons, but I didn't like the fact that you were having strangers come in a house and you don't know what their financial qualifications are, you don't know who they are, you don't know what their intent is, and of course it's gotten a little hairier over the years. I know you teach a class on conducting open houses and agent safety. Should you let them use the restroom if they need the restroom? There's medicines and things in there, and or should do you have to keep an eye on them constantly? I know your open house lecture that you give, which is a 3-credit course for agents, you tell those agents to take certain precautions, right?
Yes, I do. Because being a woman, I've always been aware of the fact that I'm very much a victim in this home. It's not my home. I don't know the idiosyncrasies of it. I don't know how to get out if I need to. So I'm very aware of things like that, and I tend to pass that on to my class. And some of them are horrified. The first time I taught it, I had a woman sobbing because she thought it was a safe profession, and it can be, but you need to be very cautious and you need to take the precautions. We are responsible for ourselves. So, and I don't carry a gun. I don't have a license to carry, but I carry a flashlight, a long mag flashlight, same size the police carry. And there's a reason the police carry that flashlight. So, and that's what I tell them to do, that they're important enough to go out and get a mag flashlight and put batteries in it and make it heavy and keep it with them. There's always a reason for a realtor to have a flashlight. So
yeah. That makes perfect sense, and because everything has changed. But I just don't like the environment of an open house as well. Just for the not only security, you don't know who you're dealing with. And years ago, it was a little bit different. People, it was more on the face value. You took people for the face value, and now, unfortunately, that's not the case. Not with everyone, obviously. But so when you're closing the property that you just put together, when is the closing?
Hopefully, April 30th.
Okay, and as of right now, that's only a few weeks away now, so we'll probably still be in this self-quarantining position, right?
Yep, and I won't be allowed at the closing.
Right. So, but the key is you're getting it done. I mean, you're getting it done. You satisfied your fiduciary to those buyers who absolutely positively needed a house, even in the middle of this whole, self-quarantining issue, right?
And we visited and discussed their questions through the window today. And I thought back to, my goodness, I used to do this. I remember my grandmother leaning out the window and talking to me. And here's this buyer who lifted the window and said, I still have another question. And I stood in the rain outside her house and answered her question because she's on quarantine and, she didn't want me in there. And she left her paperwork on the door. So it was a very different way to do real estate. But there's always a way to modify. And I think that you're right. Americans are very resilient in the way we do things.
That's great. Well, let's take one more commercial break, Jeanne, and we'll be right back with Real Estate Pro Talk.
Real Estate Pro Talk is a live radio talk show dedicated to educating its listeners on the entire spectrum of real estate matters. Part of the American dream is owning a home or investment property, or perhaps even becoming a real estate agent yourself. Paul Vanas and his team of real estate professionals have over 250 combined years of experience in the industry. In other words, we can make it happen for you. Why go down the road less traveled when we can put you directly on the real estate superhighway? Whether buying or selling in today's complicated real estate market, or if you just need advice about jumping into the real estate business for a career change, you'll need a decisive edge based on experience. Call Paul Vanas at 401-265-6144 for a free, no-obligation consultation. That's Paul Vanas at 401-265-6144.
And we are back. Welcome back. And of course, if you would like to call in today, it's 766-1240, and tell us what you're doing. It doesn't have to be real estate related. We're both interested in how you're faring during these times. What kind of protocols? Jeannie, I can't walk in my house. My wife has me on lockdown. I have to wipe my shoes. I have to, the clothes go in the washing machine. There's a whole host of things. It's almost like I work at 3 Mile Island. I'm going to have to get one of those nuclear, the suits that they wear, the white suits, and with the respirator and all 9 yards. Are you seeing the same thing?
I am. Of course, I live alone, so I don't answer to anybody in my house, but I get the phone calls. Are you being safe? And the other day, when I was going to the school to teach a class, my granddaughter called, and she said, "What are you doing out?" And I went, "I'm going to teach." "Why?" I said, "What's wrong with it? I leave my house that I live in by myself. I get in my car by myself. I go to the building. I teach by myself. Nothing changes." And she went, "I don't like it."
Yeah.
So she wants me locked down in the house. That's it. Do you need anything? I'll bring it over. And it's like, I don't want them near me. I don't want to. I want to stay safe in my house and let them stay safe in their house. And we'll do Zoom meetings or like this, FaceTime. But yeah, it's a strange world.
Yeah.
We're having dinner together on Zoom. We're having dinner in 3 separate homes. We're all going to make our own dinner, sit down, and share a meal together through Zoom. I've never done that before, but we stay close together that way.
It's something like right out of the old science fiction movies that we watched when we were kids. These virtual parties, and what's his name, Dick Tracy, with the telephone, with the TV on his wrist and everything else. It's life imitating art. But it's finally come true. I was thinking of something the other day when you and I were going through the classes about the personalities of the agents who are attending our classes right now. Real estate agents are usually, I hate to use the word ADD or ADHD because I'm a little bit of that, but we're not used to being cooped up. We're not used to working in an office all day long. Years ago when I had my job for a plant in Providence, I was in a little 8x8 cell all day long, and I'd come out for lunch and I'd go back in. Real estate agents aren't used to that. They're used to buzzing around and going here and going there, and town hall and DEM and the sellers. So they're feeling, I'm sure, some sort of cabin fever right now. Have you experienced any of that?
Oh, I am having cabin fever so bad. Yeah. The week before we did that weekend of teaching, I just was climbing the walls because there was just me in the house. I could have the radio on, I could have my music on, I could do all of that, but it was still just me. And I was envious of my friends that are still married because they at least could talk to somebody, and then they're complaining because it's too much togetherness. So I don't think any of us are doing really well right now. I think but I do think that when this is over, companies are going to realize that they can have employees working at home. So I'm of the belief that when this is over, we're going to have a lot of people looking for bigger homes because they need more home offices. My daughter in Colorado, she moved into a place knowing that she needed a home office, but the other one was going to go to the office. And yeah, they're both working from home now, and one of them is working on an ironing board. So if that doesn't change, if she doesn't go back to the office, they're going to need a bigger place. And I think we're going to find a lot of people are going to need to move for reasons of either homeschooling or working from home, which they didn't used to do.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense because, of course, years ago, we never had to worry about that. A 3-bedroom house was a 3-bedroom house, and now a 3-bedroom house is really a 2-bedroom house because one of the rooms is an office, unless there's a finished basement or something where you can do your business in. And I think there's going to be a lot of change out of this, Jeannie. I think. For the good, mostly for the good, some of the bad. I think the social aspect is going to disappear a little bit, and we've already been in a decaying social environment over the past years. A lot of kids, they're in front of these game stations every night and computers every night, and they don't kind of socialize like you and I did way back when. And of course, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I think that's just a different thing. But I think a lot of the manufacturing now, I think this was a wake-up call to a lot of companies now to come back to America, and that way we can't be held hostage, for lack of a better term, for supplies or goods or services or whatnot. Because let's face it, we've kind of given the farm away over the last 30 years to other countries, and now all of a sudden we find ourselves in a position where we need them, and we can't get what we want when we want it. So my wife and I were having this discussion this morning. I said, if I have to buy an iPhone, which I don't like buying every 2 years, but unfortunately you have to buy them because the thing becomes obsolete, and I have to pay $700 for the iPhone, or I have to pay $750 for the American iPhone, I'm going to pay $750 for the American iPhone. Now, obviously, there's economies of scale, and some people can't afford to pay that extra $50. I understand that, but I think a lot of goods and services are going to come back to this country because of this. I don't know if you feel the same way.
I do. I think we're starting to become more dependent on ourselves, which when I was growing up and when you were growing up, we supported ourselves with manufacturing and all of that. We didn't ship it out. The jobs here were taking care of us. And I think more of that is going to happen here because we did become, when China shut down because they had the virus, everything, the whole world shut down. And we can't have that. Can't be so dependent on one country.
Yeah, and it'll put a lot of people to work. It'll put, I think, just off the top of my head, I know we got about a minute left, but I think off the top of my head, a lot of these kids that have been forced to work in the McDonald's and the fast food kind of things, there's going to be other opportunities for those kids other than, washing dishes in a restaurant. They may not, the jobs may not be the jobs that they'll end up with in life, but at least there'll be good starting off jobs to get them, used to building things and learning how things work and so on and so forth. Yep,
I agree. It may not be, I don't think the virus was the way we needed to go about it. I do think it's going to change us.
Yeah. And of course, Northern Rhode Islanders are very resilient. They've been through lots of times, between the manufacturing leaving Northern Rhode Island years ago, and the Woonsocket area was the market to be in 100 years ago. It was the financial hub of Rhode Island, so to speak. So we got about 10 seconds left. Jeannie, thank you for coming in today.
Thank you for having me.
And of course, if you need to get a hold of me, my number is 401-265-6144. Thank you for listening to Real Estate Pro Talk.